origin out of Kazakhstan, or the very small populations that are very open to international migration and where the movement of relatively few people can affect very much the balance of emigration and natural increase. In the next slide, as I said, we now have the cases, the recent cases of countries in the developed world. Most of them are in Eastern Europe, or are there the successor states of the the Soviet Union. And there are interesting cases because many of them are having already negative natural increase. The yellow bars, as you see, are the natural increase, the rate of natural increase, and they're negative for many of them, or they're extremely low in other cases. The highest rate of natural increase here is for Albania, that is 1%. That is high for the region. The other highest is about 0.5% per year. And in most of them, the net emigration rate that they're having is either exacerbating the loss of population because of the excess of deaths over births, or is counterbalancing, more than counterbalancing in the case of Albania, the growth rate, the rate of natural increase that the country has. So my first conclusions from this part is that the net emigration is making, that's the next slide, net migration, and in this case net emigration, is making increasingly sizable contributions to population change, particularly in the developed world where the rate of natural increase is very low or negative. And net emigration has reduced substantively the population growth in some countries. Again, the countries are either very special because of the special socio-political circumstances they have, or they tend to have small populations. The next slide is telling you that now I'm going to look at the net effect of international migration, but now thinking of immigration on population change in terms of the countries of net immigration. Their net immigration is going to contribute to increase natural increase. And I'm going to look then at the ratio of net migration over the total of population change, not just natural increase, to know what percentage of population change is caused by net immigration. The next slide shows you the graph for 1970-1990, and immediately you notice that immigration is making a big contribution to the population change of developed countries. Those are the red bars to the right. But there are also important places where net immigration is making a big contribution to population growth in Asia. They tend to be the small countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, and in Latin America you have the very special case of French Guiana that is also attracting a lot of immigrants, and it's the blue bar there that you see as high. In the developed countries, the biggest outliers are Channel Islands, Luxembourg, Latvia, Sweden, and Estonia, and as you see again, relatively small countries and with very specific histories. The next slide in 1990-2000 is the same graph, and what it shows compared to the other one is how much more the immigration has become an important component of population growth for developed countries. We now find that in about half the countries of the world, at least net immigration is contributing at least 20% of the population growth. And we have many countries in Europe, like the Czech Republic, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, the Russian Federation, and Slovenia, when immigration has contributed to counterbalance negative population growth, the natural increase. So if they're growing at all, or if they're not declining that much, it's because of net immigration. Now, I've used all my time, and I have another part to present. I need to ask the chair whether I should continue or I leave it there. This is one of the most important parts of the presentation, because it definitely shows, as the next slide says, that the immigration and emigration are having a very important effect on population increase or decrease. So should I continue? It will take me another 5 minutes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Hania.
Okay, because now I'm going to look at the relationship between, on the other direction, whether natural increase has any effect on the levels of immigration or emigration. And this is not going to be a total fair comparison, because if I were to compare natural increase alone with all, whether the net migration of all countries of the world, you would immediately see that there's no relationship between natural increase and all of them net migration, because you have some countries that are net immigration countries and others that are net emigration countries, and they occur at all levels of natural increase. So I start immediately by dividing the world again into the two groups, the net emigration countries and the net immigration countries. And for the net emigration countries, the question I ask is, does higher natural increase lead to more emigration? That means the populations that are growing the fastest, are they the ones that tend to send more people out in relative terms? Everything is here in terms of rates. So I show you two slides. The next slide is one that shows you a graph where in the x-axis I have the rate of natural increase, and in the vertical axis the rate of emigration. And you see that the points are scattered all over the place. They are coded in different ways so that you see what regions they correspond to. The main point to notice is that developed countries that have very low rates of natural increase, they're the pink squares, really have very little variation in terms of net emigration. There's a lot more variation in terms of the white triangles, and those are the Latin American countries that, as you saw, have a very important net emigration and has an important impact on its population, on their population change. That's what happens in 1970, 1990. The next slide shows you the same graph for 1990, 2010. And just notice that in terms of natural increase, now we have to go to the negative numbers, because the developed countries are clustered over the very low natural increase and negative numbers. But just by looking by eye at these things, you see that if there seemed to be some kind of relationship in the other graph, it has definitely disappeared. That the numbers, for every type of natural increase, you see emigrations at very different levels. Nevertheless, in order to see whether there's any chance of having a relationship, the next graph shows again the graph for 1970, 1990, where lines have been fitted to the different points for the different regions. And if it were true that higher natural increase leads you to higher net emigration, you would find that the lines go upwards. And you see that this happens somewhat for the line that represents the developed countries, the line that represents Oceania, which is the red line on top, and the line that represents Asian countries. But certainly it's not so clear for Latin America, the white line, and not at all the case for Africa. In the next slide is the same type of thing, but now for 1990, 2010, and you see that now the lines have become very different, and that if there is a relationship between higher emigration and higher natural increase, it's mostly for the developed countries, most of which are having very low population growth. You don't see that for Africa, where we are having the concentration of high population growth. So the conclusion, and that's the next slide, is that there's not, that the effect of natural increase on net migration is really, it doesn't produce, the higher natural increase does not lead to higher emigration, except maybe for developed countries and for the few countries that I have for Oceania. But there is not a strong association between higher natural increase and higher emigration. And now let's look at the other part, the effect of natural increase on net immigration. And that's the next slide. The question is, does lower natural increase lead to higher immigration? That means the countries that are not growing that fast, are they attracting more immigrants? Again, here I focus only on the immigration countries. We have already seen before that many countries that have very low natural increase are countries of emigration. They're certainly not attracting immigrants. But let's look at the ones that are attracting immigrants. So again, you're going to see that just the points, the scatter points in the next slide. You see the points for 1970, 1990, and you see that if it were true that lower natural increase would attract more immigrants, you would see the points sort of going downwards as the natural increase increases. And that's not what you see in this graph. In the next one, the one that is for 1990-2010, you see a slight tendency maybe for Latin America or for Asia you do have some countries that have low natural increase and relatively high immigration, but they tend to be outliers. The bulk of the countries are very horizontal. That means that for whatever natural increase you have very similar levels of immigration. So again, in the next two slides, lines have been fitted, and the idea would be to see lines that are going downwards. That means they have higher immigration for low natural increase and lower immigration for high natural increase. And for the 1970-1990, you see that for the line that represents Africa, the line that represents the developed countries, and the line that represents, I think that is the Oceania. For the next slide in 1990-2010, you see that all the lines that represent the regions in the developing world are going downwards, but not so for the developed world, which is where you would expect to find more this effect of having higher immigration when you have lower natural increase. And so it's very interesting to see that for the countries that are the greatest attractors of immigrants for economic reasons, natural increase is definitely not part of the reason that they're attracting these immigrants. So my conclusion is, and that's the next slide, the effect of natural increase on net migration, thus lower natural increase lead to higher immigration. Yes, mostly in 1990-2010, though not in the developed countries where one would expect that this effect would be more important. So my final conclusions in the next slide is that there is no consistent relationship between natural increase and either net emigration or net immigration. And in 1990-2010, there has been some tendency for immigration to be higher in developing countries with low natural increase relative to those with higher natural increase. And to add a coda here, that might be, and one would have to analyze it more, because the developing countries that have achieved low natural increase tend to be also the ones that have developed the fastest. So if they're attracting immigrants, it's very likely it's because of their better economic situation and not exactly because of their natural increase. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.